Okay, if we could have the slide up, please. So I'd just like to start with a little welcome message, okay?
Welcome to the Celtic Media Festival 2026.
Fáilte go dtí féile na meán Cailte fiche sé.
Croeso i'r Ŵyl Gyfryngau Geltaidd 2025.
Fáilte go féis na míonna Ceilte 2026.
Given that the title is AI, I'm hoping that by the second clip you're all going, ooh, what's the AI doing? Not sure. But Naomi was very kind, and a number of people volunteered to just give me a little recording of themselves saying that. And I've just switched the audio around in the recording and then used AI to lip sync for dubbing. Now, I did a similar thing for the same talk that I gave 2 years ago at the Celtic Media Festival, but with French and English, because there's no way I could have done a non-mainstream language at that point. In fact, some models actually didn't think languages like Welsh were even a language, and they just didn't move the lips. Which possibly says something about how big tech is trying to silence minority languages. But so that clip is actually people's audio being moved around. So only one of them, I think it's the second one, is actually Gaelic. The other, Irish and Welsh and English, are from other speakers. So we can now use this to potentially internationalize content or for learners. There's various different uses. I've got another clip which is actually showing that actually the technology's come on quite a lot in a slightly different way.
Welcome to the Celtic Media Festival 2026.
Welcome to the Celtic Media Festival 2026.
Welcome to the Celtic Media Festival 2026.
So in those clips, I'm actually using a general model. I'm not even having to use a specialist dubbing model anymore. And they're all driven from single stills from the beginning of the videos I was given. And yet you're creating something that's quite believable as being spoken. Now, those models are definitely better in English. That's quite hard to do. And the last one, the person doesn't exist. It's just an AI person and a completely AI voice. And you'll see more and more of this around, particularly from commercial companies, marketing, that sort of stuff, where they're just delivering people who don't exist to you, telling you things that you don't know if true or not because the person isn't real. And that stuff's starting to be personalized, which is really interesting. But it's happening a lot. Now, that's been quite a big change just in the 2 years, because, as I said, I couldn't really do it at all in the Celtic languages. Now we've still got some limitations, mainly in that it's very hard to do AI voices in a lot of the languages. There aren't many available, which for some people, voiceover artists and stuff, is a great thing, but possibly could be a bad thing in the long term, because we'll find people won't use devices if it doesn't, in a language, if it doesn't speak that language. And so they'll switch to the hegemonic language, and you find actually languages will potentially die out in those media. So there's kind of a risk there, and we have to balance those, of which we do. Now, I should introduce myself, because I didn't start doing that. I'm Robin Moore. I'm a creative technologist, mainly focusing on TV production. I work a lot with Media Cymru, and I'm doing this talk on behalf of them. They're a cluster that supports R&D within the Cardiff Capital Region in Wales. We're just coming to the end of a programme. It's a 5-year programme. We're nearly there. And I have to say, if you're interested at all in it, have a look at the website. We've got a big showcase coming up in September, which is well worth a visit. Because today I'm going to show you just a few projects that Media Cymru have done that involve AI. So I'm using them to tease out some things I think about how AI is working within the industry. And I have to say, it's very kind of those companies to say, yes, have some of our R&D. It is R&D. You know, they're thinking about the ethics, they're thinking about the logistics, the reality. This isn't polished stuff, so please don't critique it on that basis. It's them trying to see what can they do with AI. So I'm very grateful for them for doing it. I'll start with an example that actually is connected with the same dubbing pipeline that I just showed for those first couple of clips. This is from a company called Apod, and they're looking at how we could internationalize content. So Netflix already does an awful lot of localization. Mr. Beast on YouTube, he's using this sort of technology to broaden his audience. So Apod see this very much as a way to broaden audiences. At the moment, they're taking quite an ethical stance and saying, but we always voice over with real people. We don't want to use AI voices in this because we think the performance matters. But in this case, it's a program called Ein Llwybrau Celtiaid, and it's by Tinint, so it was an example that they gave us to experiment with. The original is in Welsh, Irish and English, so it gave us a lot more to play with, but in this particular instance we're taking it from Welsh into English.
Reit, ni'n gadael Tre Llandeilo, a ni'n teithio tuag at y mynyddodd, maen nhw'n galw y mynydd du. A mae yna lot o straeon a chwedloniaeth sy'n gysylltiedig ar y mynyddodd hyn, achos mae yna ddau lyn, Llynefan Fach a Llynefan Fawr.
So they're using some quite warping lenses there, and the technology kind of handles it. And it's got to that point where generally, for particularly broad open shots, the audience wouldn't notice that it's been synced. They wouldn't notice. And that's very useful if you want to sell to the States or some, basically, countries that don't like dubbed content. Now that pipeline is, I'm not going to go in any detail at all on this, but that pipeline actually still involves a human quite a lot. This isn't about AI kind of taking over. It's AI is actually doing something we couldn't do and possibly creating new markets for us. But we actually, in some languages, in Welsh, we can do some level of transcription. I mean, once, you know, Breton, Cornish, Scots Gaelic, there's very little automated transcription, so you'd be using a human transcriber. We then translate it. There's a very important step of rewriting because the languages speak different lengths, if that makes sense. And so you often have to actually rewrite the words that are said, otherwise the person's going to be speaking very, very quickly to try and get it into the same space before the next person speaks. And then we dub it in the normal way you would dub something, and it's actually the last thing is the technical bit, simply getting the sync right. And it's the quality of the dub that actually matters most to how believable it is. You can get a long way with a good dub. But what we're seeing is more of those processes slowly coming online. So in Welsh, we're starting to get AI voices that we could use. We've got a good or reasonable transcription service. ChatGPT is not bad, I believe, in Irish. You know, some of the other languages, you'll get a little bit of this. There's quite a lot of technology in Galician. But at the moment, the limiting factor is actually we don't have enough data to create new voices. And as I say, for some people, that's actually a great, I've got a lot more voice work for a lot longer to come. But in the long term, it means that technologies like this can't be used to potentially spread the language out further. Now, one thing to note about this is using AI to change the factuality of something. And with all of the projects I talk about, and this is just kind of like a general thing, you have to go to the guidelines, basically. So whoever you're making the program for, hopefully they've got guidelines. This lot all have. There are a couple of people who are still not quite caught up on the guidelines yet. Generally, that's kind of my write-up of, if you read all the guidelines, they all say these sorts of things. They'll lean slightly different ways sometimes. Channel 4's much more about access, for instance. BBC's very about journalistic impartiality and that sort of thing. So but the general points are there. You want to disclose it to the commissioner. You want to think about how you're using it. You want to make sure there's a human there. You have to be transparent, particularly if you're not in the UK. If you're in the EU, you legally have to be transparent. You know, only using stuff that you license. So you still have, basically, the thing with AI is you still have to comply it. And that's the thing that, just because it seems like magic, don't ignore that. So this is another company, Tomos TV. They did this. This is a pilot for an internet short. And their use of AI here is quite different. This is more of what you'd imagine it being used for. They're creating images, videos, but they're using it in a way that illustrates a story. So they're recognizing there's a lot of content, particularly very popular content, factual doc style content on YouTube that's usually just a talking head. And actually being able to raise the game on the storytelling by illustrating the story, but not going so far that you think that that's an actor. So this stuff looks enough AI. It's trying to get that balance right. You don't want it to look rubbish. The hands are all weird, kind of thing, anything like that. But you also need to make it at least clear without having to constantly label everything AI, 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 because people just kind of get bored and switch off.
It's 1984, and 12-year-old Matthew Bevan can't wait to fire up his first computer at his Cardiff home. he has no idea it will one day earn him a shocking title. The greatest threat to world peace since Adolf Hitler.
So the presenter is real.
By 15, he's figured out how to dodge phone charges, crack answering machines, and slip effortlessly into secure computer systems.
So Scott Dewey, the producer on that, basically did all of that with FreePic, which has a whole set of different AI tools on it. He kind of uses a process a little bit like this. Sometimes it varies, but basically you kind of storyboard. You kind of decide what your key scene starts are to illustrate the story, because it's like illustrating a book. He's kind of thinking, well, what are my illustrations to my book? He then gets reference images, so he would come up with references for a character, maybe build a character using the AI that he wants to consistently be this person, and then he'd use the same references for every shot. And in this instance, he's actually got an image of himself in the pose that he wanted. And that's his quick way of getting the composition to control. Because it's actually really hard with these tools to try and prompt all that with text. So he's come up with quite a nice little pipeline in order to have more control over what it's doing. That's coming at it from the point of view of creating something completely new. And the challenges there are more to do with how do you telegraph that to the audience in an appropriate way without actually putting them off. Given that there's increasing amounts of AI slop out there, that we're probably, if you like me, get loads of adverts, complete rubbish. Here's a different one. Sean Griffiths at Cymru Da did, and I should say, he actually did, I think it's a 3 or 4 minute film, and he actually did the whole thing in 5 days with generating a whole lot of these processes, which I think is amazing. But in this case, they did have footage. They did have the camera. They were going to go, well, we'll bring someone into studio, we'll do some shots with them. But he shows a few very clever ways of using AI to supplement the footage that he had. So in this instance, he's kind of using it to do low-cost VFX and basically save an awful lot of money, or in the realities of our business, do something at a price point that he couldn't have afforded to do it at, because the money wasn't there anyway. So the bottom is log, which is why it's not graded, so that's why it's so pale. The top is graded as well, but you'll notice there's things like he's made the clouds a lot more oppressive without, it's not just the grading doing that, and he's put a boat in. I mean, that's quite a big cost. To just, I've just got this one shot, you're going to walk across the beach, or just let me phone someone up and get a boat in there. Something that would be a lot harder to just knock up.
Ym mhob tywydd, fel cerddor, rwy'n gyflym a diflino.
So clearly you can't control the weather, so if you were trying to do a shoot and you said, no, that scene, we have to have him going through winter at that point, you'd have real challenges. So that's the case if you're using original video and you're using the AI to maybe make an edit to a frame and then to continue that edit on. Another technique, which some people call whitewalling, basically not green screening, that he utilised, basically is, can you do away without a green screen, because the AI is very good at background replacement. I think this is one of the ones that we're just on that edge. The comping isn't quite there to be proper television, but yeah, as you'll see, it's pretty good.
Dim ond cysyniad rhithiol. Y gwir, meddech chi? Gwir pwy? Pam bod eich gwir chi gadeirydd y boi teilwng na fe'n hun? I fel, mae'r gwir yn fwy na cywirdiad ffeithiol. A gorffennol sy'n tanio popeth.
One of the things I look at that and I was thinking, a lot of it's in the acting though, isn't it? And that's one of the interesting things about this technique. It allows you to control those bits that we really care about in terms of the emotional response to the story. And then this is where we get to perhaps something that's a little bit more of a dilemma, where the R&D is actually partly about what is acceptable in this sort of area, and this is where you use it to actually make shots. So it's a bit more like the first example. He's making a shot from nothing to fill in a gap. And it depends on how time flows today. I've got a little test that you might be able to have a go at and do at the end, but we'll see how time goes, just to show how easy it is to just make a cutaway. You just need a cutaway for a scene or a GV, you can just make those. And you don't have a lot of the same issues with the kind of factuality and the continuity that you would with this. But in this case, he's just injecting these little things in. Again, shots that were going to be completely out of budget. No one is not getting a job because of this shot, because there wasn't a budget to pay for loads of extras and wardrobe.
Ni yw disgynyddion yr hen dderwyddon. Etifeddiaeth i drais sy'n gyfoeth o gerdd goleuedig.
Again, having the lovely misty weather at the same time as you've got everyone in, that's quite a big, expensive shoot. I think I give it 5 days. It just shows what you can get to, and you know, it's not at the level where they're saying this is a finished item, you know, but really, really impressive. One of the dangers it shows, and I don't think particularly to their example, but generally this whole working practice is what you've got is one person trying to be a whole massive crew. And that means if the person's got a skill weakness in one area, they won't spot if the AI just goes obvious or it just gets it wrong. And one of the challenges we've got at the moment is that what the AI companies, the big tech, are trying to do is they're trying to just cram all this intelligence into the AI. But actually, what you're not getting in the AI is the friction, is the people who've got different agendas rubbing up against each other, which is part of the creative force that we have. And it's quite challenging if you do just to go, oh, I'm going to make a cutaway, make sure the person who's doing it and signing it off actually has an eye for doing that sort of stuff. Because they may know how to interview and how to point a camera, but they may not know nothing about grading. So you have to kind of think about, there's a new set of skills we're actually going to be developing in order to use these tools. But the hope is, if we use them right, we can use kind of AI in the middle as part of the discussion. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you are utilising those people. So you don't go, we're not having a set, we don't need a set designer. You might go, no, the set designer is going to come up with our reference images, so we still have a set designer. And then they'll sign off if everything is right at the end when we've created all the content. And this is just an example of the kind of reference images people are using. So that you can get like a consistent character through a number of things, but you can sign off that character before the AI. You're not just pressing the button and magically hoping you're going to get a great shot, or with some of the models now, a great film, because they'll do multiple shots and try and tell a story over a narrative arc. So this is kind of now going really to the high end. Fivefold are a virtual production company. Unlike here in Ulster, they don't have a fixed studio. What they do is they talk to production companies about their needs, and they decide whether or not they need to spin up a studio for a few weeks at the end of the production. It's usually at the end, because it's very good for clearing up anything that's missing from the shots. And they design that and they run that sort of thing. So their general thing is, well, I'll give you an example of the content first. And so this is from the recently launched series, Believe Me. So that's this. It's a bus with an LED wall. Very good for that kind of thing, because trying to get streets in London closed or driving a bus round on a loop 10 times to try and get the kid to point the finger at the right time is going to be impossible. But that's really at the high end, and they're doing research on the white wall technique, because they know that actually, do you need that for everything? You don't. You know, it's environmentally more beneficial than going on location to Morocco or something, but it still is. That's a lot of LED wall. That's a lot of power. And so they've now come to this conclusion that really what we're looking at when they're making their decisions is they'll do a screen breakdown. That screen breakdown that's on location. That could just be AI. And it's making those decisions critically as you go through, rather than I make AI or I don't make AI, which seems to be the way the industry is kind of separating out at the moment. It's one thing or the other. Now, obviously, there are times when we want the separation. You know, I think BBC News should never go near AI at all because it damages trust if you can make anything. But there are things that are in between. And, for instance, one of the things I get asked most about tends to be things like true crime, things like that, where they want to go, well, we just want to do a reenactment of something. We've not got the budget to do this high-end drama stuff. How do we do it in between? Because we don't want to just have a camera pointing at someone, in silhouette, talking about something. They want to be able to illustrate it in some way. And so there are these ways of using the technology for factual content, but you do have to be careful which scenes you're using it for, which scenes aren't you, and how do you clearly demarcate when you want doing. So they mentioned there are 3 or 4 techniques. So this is my current kind of thing of the different sorts of way you can use AI. And I'm telling you this mainly because a lot of people think AI is one thing, and that's just that, AI does that. And I'm not even including the dubbing on this, because dubbing I see is kind of quite a specialist thing elsewhere. But in this, you have the kind of standard way most people do it if you want to do something quickly, like previs, or a little thing for a pitch deck. It tends to be text plus reference images. It's really easy to do. You write the text. It's also very good for things that are hard to imagine. And it's quite good for bouncing ideas off. So I don't know if you've noticed at the moment, if you open Word, you have a box at the top going, what do you want to write? And basically Copilot is there going, you don't need to have a blank page. I'll write it for you. And the AI can kind of do that in the visual sense as well, where you're actually playing with it visually to actually work out, are my ideas right? How should I do that scene? But that isn't a great technique for actually making something deterministic or having great continuity, because you're not giving the AI a huge amount of information to go on, and it will tend to kind of drift off into the things it's heavily trained in. So the approach that people use to be more deterministic tends to be a first frame approach, where you kind of go through a new storyboard, and I talked about earlier on, to do those single frames, and then you generate the videos off those frames. That technique's very good for the continuity. It's very good. The designers love it because you've got all the things in the right place. The color palette's perfect. The only challenge with that is if you want to introduce something later in the shot, it's quite hard to if it wasn't in the original frame, and that can take a bit thing. And you don't have complete control over the motion. So if it's got very complicated motions, most of the time it's absolutely fine. And my go-to is if you want to start playing with this, it is the think about your scene, break it into a set of frames, generate those frames, then play with generating the videos off them, or get one of your team to do that. If you're dealing with people, there are a number of character animation flows that are just very good at people, and what they do is you give them a video of someone, like me, I'd be talking here, and you get a video out of me being Donald Trump or whoever you wanted me to be. They tend to allow for longer videos. They tend to give you much better lip sync. You've got more control over the performance. But they're for that particular technique, and they don't work well with multi-people scenes. They gets quite complicated. And then the final one, which I think is the one that's high-end is increasingly looking at, is this video-to-video. So that's kind of like the sort of stuff that in the Cymru Dar example, where you've got some video footage already, you're really wrapping stuff around that footage. Or you could just be using that footage to drive the whole experience. And it might be you go, I can't afford to hire a Lamborghini for this. Well, I'll drive that Fiat, and we'll see if we can get the... And literally, that sort of stuff is now happening where we can swap those things out. Although I would use a car that is a similar size, generally. Otherwise, you get some weird things happen with sizing. So they've been, Fivefold have been looking at those kind of techniques, and just going to give you an idea of a very specific technique, just because it's a rarity that you see 3D techniques as well, that's really integrated in their pipeline. One of the things they had recently was a project to do a skyline in Riyadh for a kind of car park scene. So the one with the red thing is new. All the models of Riyadh don't have that in. And there was a company, I believe, quoting 10 days of artist time to kind of build this thing. And the Fivefold team got Nano Banana, which is one of the image creators, to create a nice clean image of it based on some reference photography, which is kind of in the middle there with black background. So it's nice because it's going to be a night scene. And then they used another tool called Meshi, which creates a 3D model from that 2D asset. They have to do a little bit of very clever work because it didn't emit any light to make it emit light. And then they just pop it into their normal scene, which is in the kind of bottom left. It feels quite minor, and then that's through the camera lens, it's just another thing in the skylight. And they're saying, actually, it probably took us 2.5 hours to kind of do this thing that another company were trying to say it's going to take 10 days to build. Because they were going to build an architectural model and try and do all this stuff. Well, you didn't need it, because the LED walls are always slightly out of focus. And then, it's knowing what you're doing. They're also looking at how they can improve what they put on their walls at lower costs. It can cost quite a lot to build one of these big environments for these sorts of scenes. And so they're looking at how can you use AI to change or tweak. And this is a bit like, I suppose, the Lamborghini example. You could also change things. So in this instance, we're starting off with something that looks a bit gamey, and we're trying to make it look less gamey without having to go through I'm going to have to get an artist to work on this for days and days, just changing textures until it looks more realistic. So that's actually, if I just replay that. So the real one is at the top left, and then we've got, I think it's Happy Horse, WAN 2.7, and that's Seedance. So probably means nothing to you. They're basically different models. There are quite a lot of models out there. Generally, Seedance seems to be the one that everyone at the moment is going, this is solid. This actually can be used for film things. I have some things that it can't do. But we just had, Google have just dropped one that looks like a very good model. And these models are quite general. I use Seedance for the second set of talking heads at the beginning, where I was just using a still and then it's doing the dialogue and everything. Getting deeper into it, because this particular company are working at that high end, they're really getting into the what can't it do, what is it getting wrong. And it is actually interesting. There's a big difference between making an ad for social and actually making proper television that someone else can take and post-produce and grade and all those sorts of things. Generally, a lot of the models, they're working on weird frame rates, because particularly Seedance was really designed for mobile phone use, so even the input resolution is quite weird on the model. It will output a good resolution, but if you're driving it with another video, it's kind of expecting something that's vertical. They don't really understand the concept of color space if you're getting really techie, and so that kind of causes problems when you come to grade, because you're basically getting something out that's pre-graded. You can't do log or raw. So for actually in a professional work stream, there's quite a lot of work that has to go around the outside of it. Then there's some random things it does, which are just really annoying. Models are trained on mainly whatever the company could get hold of in America. And they buy data off other people. And so the training data is really, obviously with text-based models, we have massive issues with bias because of that. But in this, you kind of get a visual bias. You'll tend to want to do certain things. The Jeeps there was quite hard to do because most of the footage it's seen of Jeeps is actually computer game footage that was used to teach the kind of gravity and the sense of movement and the way cars bounced and stuff. They just run lots and lots of game footage through it because it's a very cheap way of gathering data. The problem is then that translates into the Jeeps tend to look a bit plastically, or the people in it look like these rigid little model figures that you have to kind of be careful about. They also tend to drop a few frames, which can make it quite hard if you're trying to comp things together. And once randomly, and this is just showing it off, in the box is the actual bit that we've cropped into the picture to do some AI, to add an alien flying saucer in, just as an experiment. And the middle frame there, this is just a random set of frames. So the middle frame has just actually got the next frame's content in there just for one frame. So it's literally just skipped a frame. And that obviously may not be noticeable immediately, and then you play it back a few times and there's something weird going on there. And it's just that thing. And that's what gives us that slightly uncanny valley kind of feel, that kind of, this isn't right, this is wrong. So yeah, we're kind of waiting for let's get better at that, or building tools around them. And a lot of this work has been building tools to actually analyze what is really going on, doing things like putting test cards in and trying to see how well it can replicate the colors on a test card. But away from the high end, there are lots of AI tools that are very usable now. I mean, I know a lot of people are using it for pitch decks. As I said, pre-viz is a really interesting process because it actually makes you think in a different way. If you're actually kind of got a tool that can do all this stuff really quickly. I would warn you that, again, pitch decks, get a graphic designer involved, because the problem is getting some very poor pitch decks, because people think, because they work in the industry, that they've got a really good visual eye and they can do all this stuff, and I'm here to tell you a lot of us can't. Risk assessments, a really interesting one that's come up because I do quite a lot of training across the Cardiff region, and then a number of companies go, well, actually, we're using it for risk assessments. And it's like, well, it's really good at risk assessments, because it comes up with loads of things you didn't think of. And you can give it all the rules. You can give it exactly the way the BBC guidelines say that you should put that term in form. You just tell it that, give it the whole lot. And so there are some things like that. I'm not saying it doesn't need checking. You still need to have the human read the thing, but wouldn't it be great if someone actually read the risk assessment, you know, in order to check it, rather than just not doing it? Logging, brilliant in English. Welsh, we can just about do it. I'm sorry to say the other Celtic languages, your transcribers aren't really good enough for it yet. So you kind of have to log in English. We're starting to get there with some of the visual models, but that's a little bit further behind. Extending clips is just a really interesting, magical thing if you kind of, particularly if you're used to being behind a camera and someone walks in the background just the wrong time when the person was just finishing what they were saying. Or if you're like me, your interviewee's like me, I have a tendency to continue my sentences really suddenly. And that's really annoying when you're trying to get that soundbite because you want that beat. You can suddenly do it. You can just add 1.5 seconds to anything and it will keep everything that's in frame. Now again, you have to be careful. This is changing factual. Just because the tool is fluent doesn't mean it knows what was going on in that space. And particularly if the camera's moving or something like that, you're likely to have reality captured that the AI never saw. And so it turns it into a fiction. And that's this kind of blurring in some of these tools where you just have to be really cautious that all that AI delivers is fluency. It is not factual. It is really good at making things look right, look good. It is not doing real things. And, you know, and that's where obviously the separation in the industry comes when you think, this is a real thing we're doing, this is illustrating, this is fantasy, this is fiction, great, I'll use it. Just to give you an example of, this is an example from Premiere Pro, their tool for extending. Oh. He says, if I can get anything. So footage stops, and the rest of that footage is generated. So you've got a nice composition then, because she's walking most of the way across. She's not got about 1/3 of the way, and then the shot finishes. A kind of similar technique, there's one called outpainting. There's a tool, Runway, which is one of the kind of good solid tools if you want to try something. The ones along the bottom all you have access to multiple things within them. Runway has an extend tool that allows you to actually extend the border. And that's really good with interviews because you can cut in and out rather than jump cutting. Because you know, if you've only got the one camera person there, they've taken a tight shot, you can cut out to a wide and back into a tight, which again can get you around people like me who tend to finish their sentences at the wrong time, or something happening in the background. There's a tool called SAM, which does brilliant audio extraction. It's actually by Meta. I should have put that on here. And that allows you to strip out voices from audio, but also keep whatever the background sounds and see them as layers that you can edit separately. And it's really nice for making something realistic. It's used in that dubbing pipeline because, for instance, the voiceover artist isn't in the car, but we've already got the car sounds. And the car sounds are the correct car sounds. So we can draw the car sounds out, get rid of the original audio, and put the new audio in. And when you're actually out, I mean, I would imagine most people are now using ChatGPT at some level, particularly if you use a paid-for version, and if you use think mode, it's not making more mistakes than your human staff are now. The problem is, your human staff you can blame, and you can teach them not to do it next time. And unfortunately, the AI, it sometimes hides its mistakes even better than humans. And that's slightly more challenging, but it is getting to be really good as a research tool. And it really reminds me of our fear of it was like the fear of Wikipedia when that came out. And everyone refused to use Wikipedia, and now it's like seen as the only source of reality on the internet. And the AI tools are a bit like that, where they've kind of just got over that cusp where actually most of the time they'll tell you if they're not sure. You can always ask them, and I always think a great prompting technique is to always put your first prompt in and then get it to critique its answer. Say, what could be wrong about what you've just told me? And it's a really good way of making sure your research is solid. So this is just because I know people are at different levels. Just a little bit of a reminder, you do have to think about rights when you're using these tools, even creating images and video and all those sort of things. The safest thing is to use a commercial license model. So Adobe's model, you can have an enterprise license for that, for instance. ChatGPT. So they basically warrant you against legal claims to do with training data, because that kind of thing looked like it was going away and then it's come back again. It has to be said, I don't think it'll affect any of us. Maybe someone in the legal department of some of the broadcasters it might affect. But most of us, none of us are going to see royalties suddenly come our way if they do decide that training data had to be, the copyright, it was a copyright infringement for them to use it in the first place. But the things that are more important are where you create the rights issue. So you do need to clear the material you're putting in. Definitely, if it's clearly someone's work, you have to be aware, if you are trying to make something that is like something else, you may be breaching the copyright. And so if you decide you want a superhero in your thing and he looks a bit like Batman and you use a bit Batman image, even if you just put in the text in to describe somebody exactly like Batman, then you will have DC Comics coming after you. And some of the models now won't let you use, for instance, Disney. They won't let you use Disney things because they're worried about the litigation. But that litigation is going to come through to the individual user, not big tech. So that's where you have to comply. The best practice is to have a proper compliance process where you keep all your prompts, you keep your reference images as you go along. And some of the tools like FreePic and Leonardo are quite nice because they give you a full history of everything you've done, so you kind of got that log. The only thing is you have to keep on paying a subscription to them forever. So it's not so good for that. Finally, if you want to own the copyright afterwards, you need to make some significant changes to the thing, because currently, it's a bit blurry in the UK, but everywhere else in the world, pretty much you can't copyright the output of the machine. So you can't copyright that. That's good in that they can't stop you from necessarily using it, but if you want to, for instance, if you were doing a new logo for your company, or something like that, you want to make sure that you make some changes that show that you've had real authorship in the thing, and then it's yours. Great. As I mentioned earlier, AI transparency is very big in the guidelines for all the broadcasters, and legally in the EU, you have to do it in certain circumstances. You can get away with maybe putting at the end of the program that it was AI if it's a pastiche or something. There are routes around it, but particularly anything that's kind of news, you either say it's AI or you have to have a human who is the person who Ofcom will come after, kind of thing. That's basically the kind of model. I shouldn't really be mixing my worlds there, should I? Because I'm talking about the EU, really. That's where the legislation is. It'll be interesting to see what legislation comes in the UK. I would be very surprised if we don't get something pretty similar. And then the other big thing that people are finding is a lot of companies are not sorting out having a proper AI solution, and what's happening is their staff are going off and using it. And some of the research showed that of those staff, 35% of them were uploading personal data, and I think about 20% company secrets, and about 10% all your financial data, just because they think it's helping them do their job, So it's worthwhile making sure you have got a proper system, that the system is one where they will secure your stuff within the EU. So unfortunately, things like ChatGPT, it's a bit more pricey. It's £33 per head rather than 20 or something like that. To get an enterprise license, you have to have a certain number of people. But you have to really do that to be compliant with GDPR, or you have to redact everything before you put it in. So you can still get it to write emails or whatever you wanted to do, but you just have to take the email addresses out, which is not so great for instance, the risk assessment flow. When that works really, really well is when you can just pile whole threads into it of discussions about the location and stuff like that, the kind of stuff like halfway down a thread that's 20 pages long, someone's mentioned something that actually should have been on the risk assessment, but they mentioned it 4 months ago. The AI will pick up on that, it's great. But that's a lot of emails you have to strip out, it wouldn't be worth it. So the best bet is, either work for a big enough company where they've already done it, or you have to think about getting an enterprise license for your own company. Where next? Let's all get scared. So we mentioned about the dubbing at the beginning. So that allows you to potentially internationalize content in one way, but you may have text on screen that could be an issue. And of course, because it's really great for advertisers, this is a bit of software called AdSwap. And there are a few other variants of this, but they kind of do the full package. And what they're basically showing is they can pretty much swap anything out of the background so that you could have different hoardings. They're really selling it to companies that have sponsorship or in countries where product placement is allowed. The idea that you get to the end of the 5-year contract and suddenly your content is useless because it's got a load of product placement in from some other contract. The idea that you can swap that out and regurgitate it. If you had a big, returning kind of piece of content, like a Friends equivalent or something like that, it means you can remonetize it every so often. So here is the original film. I forget which film it's from. Is it Blade Runner? No. It might be. No. And they're even replacing all the reflections, the transparencies. Everyone's getting very excited about this. So Google have just launched a new tool because suddenly the Chinese tools like Seedance everyone was going, oh, they're really good. Seedance is the one with the fight with Tom Cruise. The Google Gemini Omni system is meant to be much better at physics and the realities of lighting and stuff like that. So they've really been trying to teach you that sort of thing. And so we've seen some really interesting stuff on reference images. I mentioned reference images earlier on, but of actually using it for doing relighting, where you're actually showing them these are where the lights should be placed in a 2D plan, and the AI is interpreting that plan and then lighting the person based on as if the lights were in those locations. Hopefully visual logging will get better. This would be at least useful if you are making content within a language that's not supported by a lot of the tools. Definitely for things like consent forms, being able to log exactly who's in every single scene, any brands, anything like that. And what's happening is these tools are slowly getting folded into wider logging tools. Definitely the best I've come across is one called Eddy. Which basically, they've got a lovely thing called Night Shift where you just upload all of the day's material and it works out what's A roll, what's B roll, separates them all out, categorizes them all, takes all the dialogue, transcribes it all for you, and basically does all of your logging. But it can actually then take decisions, like it can go, these are 3 of exactly the same thing. Oh, which do I think, the AI, is the best take? And then you say, yes, you're right or you're wrong. And it's just saved you having to go through and realize, oh, there's multiple takes of that. It's actually giving it to you as a decision. You can then even edit, I don't know if anyone uses Descript here, which has been a tool that's been a long time, but allows you to edit audio and video now just with typing text. So it allows you to do that sort of thing where you can change your outline, you can change the script, and it will move the edit around. It will align multicam, and it will actually even do auto rough cuts that are, I haven't tried that side of things, but are supposedly actually shockingly good. And so it can take you, basically it tends to be the job that no one likes doing, 35 hours logging all of your content, and suddenly becomes an overnight and 50 minutes, an hour, something like that. There's some really good videos online of people talking through that, and you get a better idea than I'll give you. Now we're getting to the really wacky into the future stuff. This is actually really hard to explain. I'll try and play the clip a couple of times. But this is retiming and realigning things based on individual cameras. So they film something once, and then they're showing that they can add slow motion without having changed having the frame rate information, but they can even change the filming position. So they can find filming positions you didn't have a camera in and show you the thing. This is still early stage research, but it's like kind of getting to that kind of, again, every so often you have these moments where it becomes a bit magical. So they're showing kind of bullet time and things like that. You see the angled cameras, they're not actually, the camera wasn't at that position and they're able to go, we know that. And hopefully we'll get that soon with the AI when it's doing backgrounds and things where you rock up somewhere, you do a quick sweep with your camera, so you've got everything in it. And then if you're having to make any changes with the AI, it is basing it on the real location you were at. And lastly, sorry, this potentially terrifying, is we're getting closer and closer to being able to do some of these changes in relative real time. So this is from a company called Korea, and they got down to about a 1 second delay before you start getting generated frames back. And I think it's running at 14 frames per second, so it's not there yet, but this kind of shows where we'll go, where we'll have your text prompting and the AI is actually changing the video that is playing out. So you could even be using the AI to, oh, we'll just get it to generate Astons. We won't use a graphic system anymore. The AI can do that because it will be literally behaving in real time. So the best one to look on this is the top car and the bottom car, same video. Notice one is slightly behind the other because they've got this lag. But once they're generating 14 frames per second, and they're completely changing the look of the car based on a text prompt. So you can imagine in sport this being used for rebranding all the vehicles for advertisers. So that's the end of the presentation. I have a live thing if you want to do it. I don't know. But we're at time, so I don't know. If people are happy being in the room, I can either do, I've got a little demo just to show you how quick it is to generate stuff. Do you want to have a go? Yeah. Right, okay. So I'm just going to come out of my slideshow, just to warn the guy up there. Right. Okay, so actually I'll give you the QR code on this. Actually, if you could switch back the other one back on, be great. Okay, if you take your phones out, if you have a phone in your pocket, this is where we find that lots of you aren't on the Wi-Fi. That might become difficult. We'll have to see how this goes because the Wi-Fi was being a bit earlier on. But if you have a look at... Sorry, no. Password for the Wi-Fi, that's a good question. And I did take a photograph of it for this very eventuality. But I didn't have time to put it into it. It's the Mac, all lowercase, 1234. And that's for the Mac guests one. And then, when you're in the Wi-Fi, assuming if you've got 5G, then you can use 5G for this. If you scan the QR code. Sorry? You are going to have to put in a PIN number. Okay. You're right on the ball. Right, okay, so the PIN is, I have to remember it, 39 lowercase j6. 39. Lowercase j6. So it's 4 digits, yeah, one is a letter. and then just stick your name in or whatever you want to do. You don't have to. So 39 lowercase j6. Does anyone still need the Wi-Fi or anything? Just because I know sometimes these things. Yeah, so basically it says on there, just take a quick photograph of a couple of you. It will make you crop it landscape. This is this working 16:9, so you're best off moving your camera around that way. So you take a pair of you, take one of you. It works better with a pair, often with this one, and it's going to randomly do some things with your images, if that makes sense. Right, we'll see if any of those start popping through. If it says, I have failed, there is a problem, have another go and hope that it works. Unfortunately, it's to do with the Wi-Fi. I don't know why, but that's why I put this at the end of the presentation, because I was just testing it here before we started, and my phone was being well behaved, but my computer wasn't. Has anyone managed to get in there and do images? And okay, so you then crop the image, and you need to remember to press submit after you've cropped it. There's a submit button. Okay? And this is slightly random. I tried last minute. I realized you were all going to be in the dark. And this was going to put you on a sunny beach. And that's probably going to look absolutely awful. And if you've got glasses, the reflection of, of your phone light on your face will be like, whoa! Okay, so we're putting you on the beach, but then what's going to happen is it's going to carry on making... so there's some good ones. That looks naturally like you are on a beach. Wow, that's really good. So this is you using Google's Nano Banana tool, which can edit images. Now, clearly, you weren't on the beach, and some of you will be, hopefully more of you will be out there, on the Ferris wheel. Having a potentially a romantic date. There's always one who does it sideways. Okay, so what should start happening is some of these will start turning into videos. And hopefully we'll get a variation on the videos. I hope they won't just all be on a beach. Okay. Yeah. Can I just ask, is that scary? Yeah, it is scary, isn't it? Yeah. So what I'm actually showing here is two things. Really. I'm showing you that actually it is so easy to do deepfakes now. Because 2 years ago, I did deepfaking the audience as part of the presentation, and now you can just do it with your phone with anything, which is kind of... but let's... Sorry, just trying to think. Let's see if we can go... Oh, no, that might have been one I did before. I'm trying to find... Oh, it's not doing any... Could someone maybe put a couple more images in, if... I don't know, although it is being quite slow now. Yeah. The multiple things down the side there doesn't really work, does it? Well, that's good. Oh, that's nearly there, isn't it? The light on your face is wrong, Dav. That's the only problem, isn't it? Okay, cool. I'm hoping, because this also is really interesting for cutaways and production design, but at the moment, sorry, it's random, and for some reason the timing is going against us. I don't know if another one is going to pop up. I'll show you one of just the test ones with Marion earlier. So instead of making a video of you, what it can do is put the image in a frame and do the video. And the first bit of this, the last frame, that feels a bit false to me, but the first, up to that point, that's pretty good. And that is, that's you making a cutaway for something. In the middle of an interview, you'd forgotten to take a cutaway. Well, we got this photograph of the couple when they were, now, but that isn't real. So you do have to be aware of that. What does it say about your program and that kind of thing? So you have to think about how you're telegraphing that to the audience. Just see if there's any more of those. We've got another night sky one. Oh. That started off looking not realistic, and then you sometimes find with the videos as well, they'll look, they don't look good immediately, then they look good for a while, and then they stop looking good, and you sometimes have to capture those. But do you mind me? I'm just going to play that one again. It's very good. Did you mean to hide? Oh, so that's the internet buffering. Yeah, that's not a very good one, unfortunately. Not, there any more? Oh, I don't know why. It hasn't given us any more of these sorts of ones, but it can do those really easily. It really likes a certain sort of fireplace as well. The fire sometimes looks a little bit. But this is just, and perhaps to absolutely finish off, the thing that I'm amazed about this is not how quickly it takes you to do it, is that I built this app using ChatGPT. And I run whole day courses using the app where you can go through making all the different sorts of pipelines we talk about, and you can do those sorts of things. But it just shocks me that, and it's kind of a bit kind of like hubris, but developers have actually just put themselves out of a job themselves. They program something that's so good at actually programming that you go, I've got an idea. And a couple of weeks later, I've made a massive app that can do all these things, and this is just one little thing. And that's the future, which is both exciting and terrifying. I think I have to let you all go, do I? I imagine. Is it? I think so. Thank you very much.